Today we're talking about engagement. We're talking about retention and engagement. Big subject. And we always like to start with our take on that, our definition. I think if you don't do that, then with 10 people in the room asking what engagement and retention is, and we'll have 10 different answers. So just to make it clear what we're talking about here today, we'll give you a definition. So engagement is the emotional, intellectual and social commitment to your company's culture, values and beliefs. And talent retention is your reward. So that's what we're talking about today. So just to kick us off, Gallup, who's an organisation, will run some huge surveys across the globe. Their most recent report, which came out this year from a study back in 2017, the worldwide engagement levels of 15%. Previous videos we've talked about engagement levels being at 30%. These are from 2015, 2014 surveys. So it's getting worse by the sounds of it. I think in that report as well, they said in the US that people are twice as likely to be engaged, so it could be up to 30% in the US. But overall 15% engagement levels worldwide. And part of me thinks, well, so what? Do I really need to know what the company next door to me or somebody in another country, what their engagement levels are? It's nice to know as background information, but really I need to know what my company's engagement levels are and ask you the question, do you know what your company's engagement levels are? That's the most important thing here to get your mind around.
To turn it on its head, if you think of whether it's 15% or whatever it is, because there's lots of different reports and surveys, and so the results themselves vary from report to report, from time to time. But as you said, the trend appears to be getting worse. But even if you think about it, 15% actively engaged, that's 85% of potential, or people who are potentially not engaged. So it's a big chunk of people to target with a view to improving retention rates and ultimately performance.
So yes, I think the key question is, do you know what your engagement rate is? And whatever it may be, it's going to impact your retention rates of your talent. And we've talked extensively about the cost of a good hire, the cost of a bad hire, high performing individuals, and how you retain those in your organisation.
Yeah, and just to add, Lindsay, as well, it's just, as you mentioned, what your company's engagement rate is, as long as you decide how you're going to objectively measure it, it's like the line in the sand, it's your benchmark. So at least you know if you're improving or not.
Yeah.
So
And people are pretty well switched on in organisations. When we run big surveys, you can ask the question of the audience, and they'll give you a feel for what they're experiencing. It might be their own personal levels or what they're seeing around them. So you will tend to know what your engagement levels are approximately. Three things to have a look at, and the first one is we're going to use a little phrase here called beware of the heckler in your organisation. Now, I think it's a term that translates across the globe, but a heckler, let me describe that. If you may have watched it on TV or a movie where there's been a comedian on stage and there's somebody in the audience who's heckling the comedian, the person who's on stage. They're trying to get one over. They're trying to get their own sort of significance in play here. Now, that's all they're doing it for. It's not to improve the act for the heckler, for the actor or the comedian, or for the audience, for their own personal gain. So I like to say that in organisations you will have hecklers that will be trying to bring down the main act. They'll be bad-mouthing the main act, which is the organisation, and they'll be trying to get as many people on their side as possible. So beware of the heckler. So these are the people who will be actively disengaged in your business. And as I'm saying this and you're hearing it, you'll probably have one or two names in mind. We can all do that. We've been in organisations, or we're dealing with organisations where we know who the hecklers are. They're dangerous in your business. The other two categories is one's your high performers. These will tend to be your people who are actively engaged in the business. This is your 15%. Yeah. If it is 15% for your business, it could be higher, it could be lower, but the high potentials will be actively engaged in your business. The others, and this tends to be the big audience, is people who sit on the fence. You might have 15% who are actively engaged, you may have 15% who are actively disengaged. That leaves 70% sitting on the fence. They'll just move based on the culture and based on where the strongest messages are coming from. And that's why the hecklers can be dangerous in your organisation, because they can draw that 70% to their side, and you really want them to move towards being engaged in your business. So it's just something to give you a visualization about engagement in your business. There's high potentials, there's people actively engaged, people on the fence, and those sitting on the fence, probably the masses, about 70%, and then the hecklers who are really trying to bring down the main act, which is your organisation.
Just to add as well, with the hecklers, it often appears that the hecklers are being negative, and it's coming from a place of negativity, which can be true, but also, as you mentioned, it's their own significance. So they're doing it not necessarily to be negative as such, but to feed their own desire for significance. So if you can try and show those people how they can be significant in a positive way, then you can start moving them off the fence and not having such a negative impact.
I think so. It might be somewhere you want to focus first, but again, it depends on your organisation. You've got a bigger hit with those sitting on the fence, 70% or more.
Yeah.
That could be a good place to start.
Yeah, because some of them can be easier to turn, and then you have a tipping point where the hecklers have less of a voice, generally speaking. Yeah.
So in your organisation now, whatever size it may be, try and just position people in one of those three camps. I know it's a bit rudimentary and a bit rough and ready, but it just gives you a feel for where you could be as an organisation. It's not all bad news. Let's have a look at what you think your organisational engagement levels are. The 15%, 20%, 30%, you'll get a feel for that. And then understand the categories, the hypos, the on the fence people and the hecklers. What really is common to all of us from an engagement point of view. And we're going to show this little equation on the screen here. P equals P minus I. The big P is performance, and we all want performance at the organisation or from ourselves. And the thing that will limit that is how much of our potential, so the small p, how much of that potential we can actually tap into. And we're a great believer in unleashing people's potential. We work on that extensively. But what prevents that potential is the interferences. Now, whether that's for an individual or that's for an organisation, there are interferences at play. And we'll give you some insight into what they can be in your organisation and for individuals as well. And the first one we'll talk about is the 4 key enablers. There's a big study done in the UK back in 2008. So what's that, 11 years ago now? 11 years ago. That was commissioned by the government, Tony Blair, I think, at the time.
Initially it was Blair, then it was taken over by David Cameron.
So that had a lot of political weight behind that. They felt that engagement mapped directly to productivity. Okay, so we can get better engagement levels in the UK, get better productivity. Now, that's not just for the UK, this is for any country, any business. So, big research, big benchmarking, and just to summarise the 4 key enablers. So 4 things that were really needed in an organisation. Do you want to go through
I will, and just to mention as well, there's some great resources. There's a website set up, Engage for Success. So anyone can Google Engage for Success, and you can see some great resources and reports, and the report you've just mentioned, Lindsay's on there, and some great other stats, information on there, absolutely free. It's a free government movement. So, some great stuff on there. And as Lindsay mentioned, the 4 enablers, that came from a huge research that was done. First was a strategic narrative. So what is that business story? So where you go and what's the purpose of the organisation? Engaging managers. So engaging managers and engaging leaders. So how can they really engage their team members? Third one was employee voice. So understanding the individual expectations. So making the employee feel as if they're valued, that they're listened to. Because there's one thing asking them and getting them involved for the sake of it and then not actually acting upon it. So true employee voice is actually acting upon what people are saying. And you can't do everything what people are saying, obviously, but at least give them a chance. And if you're not going to do something when they do get involved, then at least explain to them perhaps why. So it's really listening and giving the employees a voice. And the fourth one is integrity. It's about the values. It's living the values and behaviours of that organisation. It's not the post on the wall with the values listed. It's actually day-to-day demonstrating those values in behaviours.
Yeah, so the 4 key enablers, and not just from a theoretical standpoint. This was a benchmark study. It was found those organisations with high levels, not just good levels, high levels of employee engagement showed these characteristics. Yeah, at least some of these characteristics. Maybe not all, but these were the ones that felt across that swathe of high engagement companies with good performance and good productivity. Those 4 enablers were certainly key to achieving that.
There's some great case studies, real life case studies as well, from some of those organisations on the Engage for Success website.
Yeah, and just as something else just to look at in there, the strategic narrative is the business stories, we like to call it, because strategic narrative sounds very grand. So business story, where have you been, where are you now, where are you going in the future is a nice little way to describe that. And one of the ways that we have worked with clients is we call it the 3 V's. So what's your vision for your organisation? What are your values? And can you visually represent that? Can you paint a picture? We all know that 1,000 words can be, painted in a picture. Okay, so picture's really important, particularly when you're cascading through an organisation. Mentioned 3 V's here, so our next video will be on that very subject, and it's linked tightly to retention and engagement. Okay, so we have that for an organisation. Now when it comes to individuals, we all have expectations. Yeah. Now whether they've been vocalised and written down and discussed, that's another matter, but we do have those expectations. Every employee in every organisation has expectations, but also the business has a set of expectations as well. There's a lot of work done a long time ago. It's called psychological contracts, and that's where we're trying to match up the business expectations with the personal expectation. As you can see on the screen, we're showing a little representation of that, and the better you can match off those business expectations and employee expectations, and we can't expect of 100% fit, but the tighter the fit, then the more of these become very visible in the organisation and tends to improve engagement, improves performance, particularly for the individual. Yeah, so we're talking about the individual level here, and we can also measure for that using a particular tool. And I think there's 8 categories.
Yes, I was just going to mention some of those categories because it's just what is individual expectations, what types of things can be in there. It's things like obviously money, remuneration is an expectation for some people. It's things like appreciation, so how much recognition, what type of feedback are people looking for. Development expectations, we've talked about hypos a lot, so what type of development expectations, particularly those hypos, what they're going to have. Things like work-life balance, the big one these days. People do tend to want or some people want a nice work-life balance. Communication, what types of communication are people looking for? Social expectations, some people enjoy the opportunity to be outgoing and have that sort of outside of work social aspect. Things like even authority expectations, how much autonomy do you want in the workplace? So there's a lot of different things in there, what you can measure in terms of individual, the key intrinsic drivers and motivators that's going to hopefully make that person engaged and want to stay in that organisation.
Yeah.
Sometimes difficult to even to understand ourselves what those real drivers are. You've sometimes got to talk to people. You've got to dig that out of people.
Yeah.
And different tools that we use can help do that.
Yeah. So it's nothing new, but a lot of great science and study. It's got legs, it's got relevance, it lasts for a long time. So have a look at psychological contracts. We'll have a little link to that in the video as well. Yeah, so just to go back on that point, performance equals potential minus the interferences. If there's no interferences, then all of your potential is going into performance as an organisation and or as an individual. But in real terms, there's always interferences. So understand what they are, understand what is holding back the organisation and what's holding back an individual.
And just to summarise that particular bit in terms of, we look at it as a very much a dynamic relationship between the employee and those employee expectations, the organisation, so we've mentioned the vision, the values, the environment that's created for that individual, but also the relationship with the manager. Which is really important because you can be meeting your expectations, you can work in a great environment, but your relationship with your manager, if that's not there, there's a good chance you're not going to enjoy going to work, and you won't enjoy your job, and you won't be fulfilling your potential, and the performance won't be there. So dynamic relationship across the employee and the expectations, the organisation and the environment or the culture, and the relationship with the manager.
So on that very subject and relationship with the manager, obviously improving engagement will improve retention. People are more likely to stay in your organisation if they feel engaged, particularly from an emotional, intellectual and some social commitment perspective. And one of the key variables in engagement, we've mentioned the interferences, one of the key interferences can be managers and leaders. And the managers and leaders have the necessary skill set to be able to engage people. Okay, so we want to unleash more people's potential, and the people who can do that is the managers and the leaders. We use another little term as well, the power of 95, where 5% of your organisation, this will be your managers, stroke the leaders, are actually influencing the other 95%. Now, once you start looking at that leverage, you see how important it is for managers to be engaging managers, for leaders to be able to lead people. So the power of 95, 5% of your organisation will be influencing heavily the other 95%. So that's quite a lever you've got there. So that leverage needs to be the best it can be. And we always advise that managers and leaders understand what engagement is and to be taught that subject as well and that skill.
Yeah, and it's sometimes we look at engagement and you think it's this huge thing and how can we target everybody at once? A good starting point can sometimes be, obviously you need that strategic narrative, but a good starting point in terms of wanting to do something in the workplace is to target the 5%. So the key influencers, because if you're going to improve the 5%, to make them more engaging with their teams, then you have got a chance of influencing the other 95%.
Okay. So this is a subject that we know from our experiences. It's quite a deep subject. It's a subject which will affect every organisation across the globe. And we will do further videos, but just to close this one down for the day, so the call to action for you to have a think about a few things, just to be aware that performance equals potential minus interferences. So interferences are really key. We find out what they are. We've mentioned the 4 enablers. Again, we have plenty of links to what they are and reports around that as well and research. 4 enablers. This is your strategic narrative, your business story, your 3 V's as we're calling it, and we'll do a video on that next. Engaging managers and engaging leaders, 80% of the variability will come from that cohort, and I've just said there, at 5% of your organisation. Yeah, it's a good place to start. We could start to train those individuals and how to engage their employees Employee voice is another one of the enablers. Is to understand individual expectations. Yeah? And integrity is the fourth one. We're living that business story. Yeah? Living the 3 V's. I think just to finish off on individual expectations. Do you want to just finish off on the expectations?
Yeah, expectations. It's the key element. It's obviously the business has got expectations, and they need certain things from the individuals. But the individuals have got expectations, and the more the individual, the more those expectations are being fulfilled, then the better they're going to be in terms of delivering that performance. So it's difficult. We talk about, as you mentioned, the power of 95. It's difficult managing people because you've got to manage the performance, but also manage the relationship. In managing the relationship, you need to understand the individual expectations. So it's really is key focusing on the power of 95.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so thank you for your time today, and that's a video on engagement and retention.
Thank you.
Thank you.